Good morning, warriors. Fernando here, God's Prepared Warrior, and welcome to Tuesday. Just want to say a thank you to all of you who joined me last night for God's Prepared Warrior live stream, and we had a great night talking about all things Mexico, right? And today's video, I really want to focus on awareness, right? I think this is important. I know I always talk about doom scrolling and that kind of thing. But whenever we're in a state of emergency, right, in our world, I think it's important to kind of keep an ear to the ground, right? Not in the way of obsession, right? But in the way of vigilance, awareness, that kind of a thing. So, because awareness requires action, right? There is a lot of things that are happening in our world right now. And, the thing with Mexico, the war with Iran, all of the notices that have been coming out to the people in Mexico who are Americans working there. I talked to this about this last night. The embassy issued an alert to all of the people that live in Mexico that are Americans and work at the embassy to shelter in place. And so there's just so many things happening, right? And that's not including all of the things that are happening in America, right? I mean, that's just, these specific things happening around. So, we have all of that. We have those tensions with Iran, right? Violence and instability, of course, happening over there right now in Mexico. And even all the smaller global conflicts, right? And all of that is going to strain and stretch the supply chains, and it's gonna hurt the economies, and so this is important. These things are happening, yes, and it's also important to kind of keep an ear on the ground to see what these things are going to affect, right? So as always, this video is not about fear. So this is not a fear message, but this is an awareness message. This is different than probably what you've heard me share before, but because awareness without action becomes complacency, right? I've listened to people who say, Fernando, it's okay, it's happening over there, it's not happening here. And I'm hearing this loudly all the time. And all of that is complacency, right? And so complacency is far more dangerous than preparation. It's just what it is, right? The line, stop thinking. It's over there. It's just over there. Don't worry about it, right? This is one of the most, common, mental traps that can happen, right? It's bias. It's what it is. Yeah, it's happening over there. It's not going to affect us. It won't. It's somebody else's problem, right? But in a connected world, right? Energy markets react, globally. Supply chains cross borders. Financial systems, ripple instantly. You can have one country, their dollar, goes out, or it can send ripples across the spectrum, right? Migration surges shift regional stability. So conflict, doesn't have to cross your street. It doesn't have to affect your life, but you will feel it in different ways and in different things, right? Preparedness begins when, you accept that ripple effects are real, right? That's when preparedness begins. You're able to see and understand this thing is happening over there. I think, I kind of need to watch that a little bit. And, over here, I need to, prepare, right? What are happening to the people over there? Were they prepared? Did they have things in place? This morning, I sent my wife several videos, because now there's more videos coming out from what happened in Mexico. This one particular video I saw, which, is kind of close to me, because this was a family who owned, I guess, what you would call like a taco stand, and in right in front of them, violence breaks out, and the family, the wife and the husband, are frantically trying to help people get to safety, and it's right in front of them while they're doing and doing their business. And so it's close to me because I have a coffee trailer and a coffee business, and what sets off in my mind is, if I am selling coffee in my coffee trailer and violence like this erupts around me, would I be prepared in that moment? And that's where preparedness begins, right? When we accept the idea that ripple effects are real, right? Your response should not be fear, right? It should be discipline, right? Fear says, panic buy. Fear says, obsessively watch the news. The fear says obsessively talk about collapse, right? But discipline says, I need to review my supplies. I need to make sure that, I have things in order, right? Discipline says I need to strengthen my house. Discipline says I need to strengthen my household, right? My family members, my children, my wife. I need to have communication on these kinds of things, right? Discipline says I need to improve my fitness, right? Discipline says I need to build margin, right? And so I think there's a point where we need to say to ourselves, and I'm saying this to myself, is, okay, so we've been doing this one thing. What's the next step, right? For you, what does that look like? Does it mean you need to, check your food? Maybe you haven't, maybe you've been stocking up, and maybe you really haven't looked at what you have. Maybe you haven't created, an inventory sheet, right? Do you have at least 30 days of food, right? In case something does happen and you're told, like people over there, you need to shelter in place, right? That means you cannot go to the store, because the stores are being caught on fire over there. That means that you can't go out, unless you risk your life, right? So they're telling you, shelter in place, and there's not a, well, we're gonna do it for this long. No, it's just until all of that violence, kind of stops or is taken care of by authorities or whatever, right? Are you doing that? I think, we should do that. I think we should check to make sure that we have a pretty good water plan, right? And not just water bottles, right? But, storage. We're talking about storage of water. We're talking about purification. Do you have the tools necessary to sustain that water for a long period of time, right? I talked about this last night. We need to check our finances, right? Are we building reserves, or are we just kind of spending emotionally, right? It's important for us to, to check, on all those things. Another thing is, We need to look at our physical condition, right? Could you handle stress if it increased? I mean, you know, I always play with people when they say, Fernando, I know you go walking, and I know you're trying to exercise, but do you run? And I'll tell people jokingly, no, my body's not built for that, or homie, don't play that, but the question that we should be asking ourselves is, if something happens, are we going to be able to handle the stress that comes, right? Are we going to be able to run? Are we going to be able to walk far with our bug out bags, or all of that kind of stuff, right? Preparation is not dramatic. It's quiet, it's consistent, right? And it's upgrading, the things that you have already been working on, right? I think we need to kind of move from a passive awareness to active readiness. I think, in my motto that I always say to everybody, stay vigilant, stay prepared. I feel like a lot of people maybe kind of hang in the, stay vigilant more than they are prepared. And I think it's time for us to move from just passive awareness to actually active readiness. That's important, right? It's important to be informed, but it's really not enough, right? We have to ask ourselves, if fuel spikes, am I positioned well, right? Do I have fuel to sustain myself even if fuel runs out, right? If the supply chain tightens, do I have reserves, right? If regional instability, kind of increases, is my family going to be calm, and are we going to be prepared, right? This isn't about expecting collapse. This is just about, respecting uncertainty, right? Because it can happen. And I think that, with all of that physical, right, on the spiritual side of readiness, vigilance is biblical, right? Panic is not. A steady heart in uncertain times kind of reflects your trust in God. I kind of hit on that a little bit last night, right? We prepare not because, we're afraid, but because, we are responsible. This is what we are called to do, right? Faith, doesn't eliminate preparation. Faith stabilizes preparation, right? When your trust is in God, your response becomes measured, right? It's not denial, it's not hysteria, but it's readiness, in all its form. That's what it is, right? So, the war with Iran, the violence near our border, the global instability. This is not the time to ignore all of that. And it is not the time to panic either, but it's the time to get ready. We should be in the getting ready season of our life, right? This is not out of fear, but out of awareness. Not out of anxiety, but out of discipline, right? So we should be prepared, calm, and vigilant, right? So, all right, guys, this is what I have for you today. Hopefully this brings meaning to help you get ready and get prepared. And let's talk in the comments, how far is your preparedness? How far are you in that? Or are you a first-time person? Are you seeing this video for the first time and you are now becoming aware because of the things that are happening? We would like to know. And our community can help you get to a state of readiness. And there's no dumb questions unless you're just trolling. Come on, guys. But let's get ready. I mean, I would rather be ready and nothing happen than to not be ready and something happen and then, you know. So remember, guys, stay vigilant and stay prepared. Those two things, they go hand in hand. And, you know, it's not to stay in the first one and not do the second one. So let's stay vigilant. Let's stay prepared. Guys, have a wonderful Tuesday today, and hope to see you on tomorrow's video.